Welcome to episode 396 of We Don't Die Radio. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international bestseller called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And if you are listening to this and you'd rather be watching and meeting my guest via video, go over to YouTube, type in We Don't Die Radio 396. And just a reminder, our home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find our free and fabulous weekly inspirational service called our Sunday Gathering. It's complete with a medium demonstration included. We also have upcoming classes and events and all kinds of good stuff. wedon'tdie.com. Our guest today is near-death experiencer Jacob Cooper, who is a clinical social worker, Reiki Master, and certified hypnotherapist who uses his extensive personal and professional experience to empower one soul at a time. He is the best-selling author of Life After Breath, and his latest book is called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Jacob is a sought-after speaker on grief, wisdom, and consciousness, offering meditation and mindfulness seminars to help others find purpose and overcome their fears. You can find out more about him at jacoblcooper.com. Jacob, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
It's good to be back after, what is it, like 5 or 6 years since our
Six
last,
years,
yeah,
six years. I think it was episode 147, and here we are at 306.
wow, wow, wow. You've done so much since that time. And even before that, when I knew you, it's just amazing the work that you've done and the lives that you've touched. And I'm so lucky to play a small part of that. So thank you
Oh,
for having me on.
thank
Yeah,
you so much. And once we share our passion, we just can't go wrong. So let's pretend that you've never been on the show before, because people would have to go scroll way, 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 way back.
gotta
Find
go
that
into the
one.
archives there. Yeah.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep. So obviously the title of the show is We Don't Die. So we always like to hear stories about why you believe in the afterlife, but we also want to share what it is you're up to. So let's go back. Tell us a little bit about who you are and some of your experiences that have you here today.
Yeah, well, I'm like you said before, I've written my second book. It came out in January called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and that right now has inspired me to develop my own, podcast and YouTube channel called The Wisdom Jacob's Ladder, and I give over wisdom, and guidance and have guest interviews, and I know we're going to be having you on as my channel. But for me, I'm a near-death experiencer, like you said before, and I had one at a very young age, and my life's goal, kind of like yours, is to give over some of the insight that I've gotten, from that transformation and to give it over to others. And when you feel something so deeply, there's a part of you that just can't deny giving it to others. It's too much for you to hold on to, that you want to just have someone feel and experience what you've seen. So, um, we had different paths, but for us, we had that same degree of enthusiasm to share the afterlife to this life with people. You know,
Absolutely. Well, what was your near death experience like, if you can go back? And do you remember it clearly?
I do, and I'm learning more each day about it because, as we know, the experience is just the experience. But each and every day, and near-death experience researchers will tell you it takes time to really fully understand, make sense of, and to integrate, the experience. They say it takes around 2 to 3 decades to really come into form with it, and that's certainly happened to me. But I was just the young age of 3 years old, which is very different than a lot of other experiencers that people might have seen. But to me, it's good to stand out. It's good to be different. But there's a profound different message that my NDE has than maybe others, which we'll get into. But I was just 3 years old. I went to a playground. I, at the time, had pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough, and I climbed onto a ladder on going up into a slide, and I just began suffocating due to this whooping cough. And due to the suffocation, all parts of my body just began to become irresponsive. They weren't functioning. The analogy I always give is like you're in a car, you try to have your car working, the car's not working. So there's no point in hanging in your car. You're going to go outside of your car, pop the hood and see what's going on in the engine. And that's kind of what I did, where I just kind of was able to see my body and become aware of it. But I was also aware of my own brain, and I was able to really understand my brain through a whole other viewpoint. And obviously, they say that we use a very small part of our brains in our lives. And for us, most of us can't understand our brains because we're using the brain to understand it. We need other degrees of awareness beyond just the brain itself. But I felt my brain literally snap in half due to the deprivation of oxygen, as if you're hearing a large thunder sound. And I felt this large crack in my brain. And there's a euphemism that says, my brain cracked open, and that's when God came in. And that literally happened to me, though. It wasn't like something that just totally happened outside. It was literally something that I felt within my brain. And once my brain cracked open, that's when this whole other awareness, came into form in which became aware of the religious word is God, but to me, it's more than just a word. I say it's the centerpiece where all of life emanates and flows from, in the highest apex of reality as we know it. And I just felt myself just soaring into this infinite awareness where there was no beginning, there was middle, no end. It was just endless euphoria. And I just became so comforted by this, but it was such an overwhelming transition from a 3-year-old boy just all of a sudden going into this endless pinnacle of euphoria and love and understanding, and I became aware of my own thoughts, my own concerns as to what my life would be like and leaving my own parents behind, and questions like, what would I look like? What would this life be like? And all of a sudden I just felt this wave of consciousness. And the best way I could describe it is a Christ consciousness. A lot of near-death experiencers will describe Jesus himself coming to them, but to me, this was much deeper, where I felt this awareness, or kind of like this octave on the other side that was a familiar vibrational frequency. And when I was in this presence, it just felt like a sense of comforting, where all my fears that I had were just kind of dissipating. And in this presence, I had an understanding of timelessness, that all was well, will be well, and is well. And I was just able to bask it into that sensation. And slowly I just felt my body beginning to becoming aware of my body in this earth reality. And I was able to feel and see my own spirit guides, which is a male and female guide. And when I was looking to them, they were to the right side and left side of me. And I just was in awe of how incredibly beautiful they were, but also just my degree of forgetfulness that they were with me each step of this journey. There was just so much um, in there that they were with me. And when I looked at them, they were just the most beautiful beings. I don't have descriptive words, but the best way I could describe it is, imagine you have, a tremendous crush on like a celebrity or something, and then you find that they feel the same way about you, and you're like, me, like you're like, that's the kind of like the way that I was. It's like these beings that were so otherworldly, but they were just as in awe of me as I was within them, and they were just as invested in me as I saw in them. And then my body was just flatlined on the ground, and all the people that went to me in the playground that day were calling my name and just asking me if I was okay. And I was able to feel my body next, my form next to my body, and I wanted to just shake them and tell them that I was okay. And the suffocation was something that lasted for me almost 2 decades until I really owned my story. But that period of suffocation where I could see them, but they couldn't see me, is probably how sometimes our loved ones feel about us. And on the other side, it's unique, but I was able to see them and know them through such a greater depth, where I was able to see their auric fields and know who they were. I was able to know their hearts and their minds and what they were about. And it just dawned on me, looking back, that everyone is a spiritual being, and it's not monopolized by a select few like we associate, some as just being spiritual and others are not. We all come from the same source, and but some people integrate it and expand upon it, and others might have more amnesia about it. But slowly I looked up and I saw just an endless sea of angels that was floating right in front of me. And these angels were kind of like, the best way I could describe is, you have this reality, just turn up this dial just ever so slightly, and there are angels all around us at all times, just a thin veil separating this dense physical reality and the other side. But when I was looking at these angels, I was able to hear their beautiful choir, their sounds, and I was able to look at their colors. They had like a gold color. They're very youthful in their presentations, and they're just floating very peacefully, just sending energy. Contrary to the spirit guides or the primary guides that I had, these angels that I was seeing were very identical. They were very uniformal, but the uniformality was just an unconditional love, and they were focused more on the macro than, but the spirit guides were more the micro focus, more focused on me. And then slowly I became aware of my own, soul family that would just kind of step forward as if, you're on a beach and then you see on the shoreline, all these people coming to you. And it was just beautiful. There's so much more to it, but I don't know if you have any questions so far.
Yeah,
I'm
I
open to
do.
it.
And then I want to hear more. First of all, you're telling the story as an adult man.
Mm,
And as a child,
sure.
obviously, you wouldn't have had this language.
Mm,
But can I assume, because most people I've spoken to about their near-death
mm,
experiences, they can recall them like they were just yesterday, even if they happened when they were a
mm.
child. Is it something where you're able to put adult language to it? Because now you can go back and like witness it again and verbalize that they were angels. And I love how you said, if you have a crush on somebody and you find out they feel the same way.
Right, right,
To me, wow, that's unconditional love. But is it because that memory is so clear that as an adult you're really able to process it and understand it,
mm.
whereas a little kid, I don't know if you could put those words to it.
It's a great question. I mean, I know in other interviews, I'm my own biggest skeptic to a degree. Like I'm a Taurus. It takes a lot for me to to talk about this stuff. But
Yeah.
in other interviews, I would say, all right, I was in preschool. I was 4 or 5 years old, but really, I spoke to my parents the last couple of years, and they said, no, you were just 3 years old, and that just blew my mind. That it was that long ago, and I was so young when I had this. I just can't imagine it. But yeah, I was in preschool. But my father told me recently that I was 3 years old, and shortly after I came to him, and I said, remember when I was rushed to the hospital? Something happened in that day. It's not going to make sense to you now. I can't really describe it now, but one day you'll understand. And he just recently told me that. And for me, my dad is also a therapist. He's not, whatever you see is what you get. And for him to really say that, it just gave me a lot more confirmation of my experience. But to answer your question, and this is going to sound thought provocative to viewers, but we're all here to expand. The best way to answer is, you know, we are not our ages, we are not our genders, we are not our name. We experience all those things, but there's a greater soul, there's a greater energy beyond just the way that we see ourselves through the egoic consciousness or how we experience ourselves in this time. So essentially, chronological age does not always match up with soul age. So I find kids, for instance, they're coming from the other side. So from a soul level, from a soul age, they're probably a lot older in their inner awareness than some adults who have lived here 80, 90 years are very disconnected. Sometimes the young are old and the old are young. But the beautiful part is when the soul integrates itself into the body. When the soul age integrates itself in the chronological age. That's a beautiful thing when the two are meshed. So for me, it took me some time to really put words to it. And to this day, that does not do justice. But I do it not from necessarily myself, but I do it for others. And, I think the near death experience is a gift. Pablo Picasso once said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, remember a gift, and the purpose of it is to give it away. And that's what I try to do with my NDE, that it wasn't just about me, it was for me to let go and to give to others.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think all those things that we experience, whatever they are, great to have them, but where the true meaning is when we can be
all
in
right.
service of others and help people live a
Yeah.
better life. So what other things happened? You said there were more things that happened within it that you could
hmm
share.
Absolutely. And so I was then posed a question, which is one of two positions with NDEers. Normally, with near-death experience research, you're told, "Hey, it's not your time. You've got more work to do," which is probably the usual, I would say, more so than not. But for me, I was given autonomy as to what I wanted to do. Did I want to cross over to the other side and continue over there, or did I want to finish off my life in this body? And I was just unsure. It was the hardest to this day, that's the hardest question I've ever been posed. And I just was just wondering, what is this life about? Why am I here? And then all of a sudden, I had a phenomenon which is now I understand as a life review, which I was able to have an understanding, a wide panoramic viewpoint of my life, almost kind of through film or understanding of the experiences that I had, but also the understanding for those around them. And it wasn't pathologized; it was a beautiful experience. But I was able to also have this life review in other different lifetimes that transcended this lifetime. And the last lifetime that I became aware of, I became emotional. I started seeing a lot of students that I worked with in that last lifetime. But I remembered that in that last lifetime, I had and I know this is a sensitive topic. We could certainly talk about it, but it was death by suicide. I don't say commit because you don't commit cancer, you don't commit heart attack. I look at mental health no differently than physical health. But I just remembered being incredibly cornered and suffocated in that lifetime, and then just making a decision. But I wasn't judged. I wasn't condemned. My life went on. I was accepted and embraced. When I remembered my crossing over experience in that last lifetime. But I understood the parallels looking back on it from that last lifetime. In the NDE, I always say messages are repeated until those lessons are embraced in a way. And the parallels are undeniable with my NDE, where I was once again feeling a sense of suffocation. My physical breath was totally taken from me, and there was nothing for me to hold on to. And then through surrendering to this whole new breath of eternity within inside of myself that I was forever connected to, I was reminded, that pain, discomfort, all those things are temporary, but who we are is infinite, eternal, and it's about surrendering to that light, especially in those darkest moments, and but I was able to see myself, what I would be doing in this lifetime, and I saw myself speaking in front of a lot of people, and I said, wow, the other side is just always going to be there, but this opportunity, to finish this off and to continue to write the story and to bring this into here, I cannot turn that down. And so I agreed to stay. And then once I made that decision, everything from my immediate awareness just kind of dissipated. And then I was left with just doubt and fear. I was just like, how is this going to happen? I don't believe this. I'm going to and then the guides just really told me the value of trust, the value of trusting this path. And then I just woke up on a hospital bed. My mother was there, and it was a very difficult experience, moving forward afterwards, to really make sense of, you know.
So you grew up as a kid. Did you find you were somebody who was really compassionate with others? Did any of your childhood reflect the man you grew to become? Or
Yeah,
did
it's
this
hard to
just,
say.
yeah.
It's hard to say nature nurture because have to be honest. I come from a family of humanitarians. I come from three generations of social workers, and my mother works as a physical occupational therapist. We're all very giving people and healers, and that was very installed in my home, and we had a lot of good cultural religious values. That it was kind of like Ubuntu, that African American, that South African principle of community and a person is a person through a person. But for myself, it was more intuition that I had after this NDE. I just remember being in preschool and sitting in class after I got back from my NDE, and I don't remember a lot, but the things that I do remember are just otherworldly, and discuss maybe how that is possible. But I just remembered feeling my brain in this sliver of light that I was able to feel in my brain. And, when I would get quiet, I would just be able to cross over to the other side and just have communications with, as we know, the term spirit. But I was also able to have this degree of interdimensional communication, and I was able to see loved ones, had premonitions. And, one day just turned to a classmate. I was, seeing some stuff on the other side, and this was so clear. And the classmate just looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" And so that understanding just made me feel very isolated. Like I was kind of like the only one. So for me, I enjoyed getting quiet. I would just kind of go to the bathroom and just, I remember, preschool and kindergarten, just getting very quiet and having these conversations, with this higher energy that we're all connected to. So, like a lot of NDErs, I felt more comfortable over there than over here. But at a certain point, to survive, I had to just bog that down because the world was coming 1,000 miles away from me, and they wanted me at a certain point to be more in love with, I would say, regurgitation versus imagination. Was just the trajectory that we were all on. It was more important to just know all this stuff in school and be left brain versus creative and right brained.
Yeah, so true. So then you got into your career and you're studying. When did you come back and say, I've got to tell this story? And was it the book that first came out, or I know when I talked to you, I think it
Mm,
was before your book came out. Uh,
yeah.
but what was it that actually like I've got to tell people this as much
There,
as I can.
there's
Yeah.
accumulation of things. I mean, later in life, in my early 20s, I had a profound out of body experience that lasted several weeks. And it just, to me, it was even more beautiful than my NDE almost, because I could say, like, I feel like I needed that for myself to really believe in this experience and not push it away. But, I was an adult, and this profound out of body experience lasted several weeks. And with, it's hard to get into the full experience, but basically I just kind of woke up one day and I was out of my body. But I think looking back in it, what kind of opened it was just myself just getting into a hysterical laughing spree at the seriousness that we take of all these things in our world that really, in reality, are nothing. And I looked at this cultural myth that I was taught, of all these things that really matter. And I just started looking at it right in the face, and I just saw the nothingness that it was, and how people would take all this stuff in this reality so seriously. And the only thing that really I knew mattered was just our soul, our love, and the beauty that we experience. And all these things are just almost like air to me, when I was looking at it. But I would say that there was a book, out of this, after this OBE, I just kind of like was on a quest to understand, like, what is this stuff in a way. And I was getting very much into yoga, meditation. Um, but it was at a seminar actually where, um, I think the biggest turning point for me was, uh, you know, I you mentioned compassion. I was a bit of a rebel, and I think sometimes when you have this experience, it's hard it was hard for myself to see adults as adults, or just to accept this reality because I was taken from it. But I guess, opened up my mouth, and my parents said, "All right, you got to live with your grandparents for a couple of days." And I just remember just getting so upset and feeling just traumatized in a way. And so I guess subconsciously walked around my block, and I was back in the playground again. And it just kind of dawned on me like, wow, I'm here in a playground. And what's about this playground? Why am I always coming back to a playground when I feel kicked out of Earth? And this playground reminded me that we're all just children here in God's playground, as our brothers and sisters keeper, here to play and enjoy. But we're up, this playground was there for a reason in my ND. I don't think it was random that it happened there, but it just reminded me how that's our home. We're all just children in God's playground. We're here temporarily experiencing this reality. And I felt this a sense of connection, closure, that this is not home. We're here temporarily, but our true home is in the depths of our heart, connected to God. But I went to this yoga seminar a couple hours later, and this woman came up to me, and I was just feeling completely low still. And she said, I see you speaking in front of a big crowd. You're going to be a healer one day. And she just read stuff about me that totally blew my mind. But she said, you are going to have a tremendous impact on many lives. And that just gave me, again, strength and confirmation what I saw my premonitions in my NDE. And this happened to me on several occasions. But the I think one of the biggest things was also getting Betty 80's Embraced by the Light, which was gifted to me by a friend. And after reading Betty's book, I'm like, wow, other people have this stuff. I thought I was the only one, and that
Right.
gave universality behind the experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to your out of body experience. You said it lasted a couple of weeks. Were you living life like you could see yourself and you're, almost like, how do I even explain? Like the 30,000 foot view. I know it's so easy to be in our own heads
Mm.
and in stress, but if we, 30,000 feet is typically where a plane flies, and you
Right.
look down and you try to find the emotion and significance and meaning, and you realize, you're just kind of hovering above, and
Mm.
everything's going to work out. This is part of being human. Was that kind of the feeling that you had, like that you could really put life in perspective when you were experiencing that for the few weeks?
I think the biggest feeling was like just not having so much dependency on external stuff. I remember just like losing like a lot of weight. I wasn't like gravitated to food as much or all these kind of things because I had this internal radiance of peace, of joy, and all these things of this reality were just kind of like routes to that, and I was already at that destination. So I wasn't so attached or needed to things of this physical reality. But coming from this place, I saw a lot of things of this reality as so magnificent and beautiful. I just remembered walking in the street and just seeing a tree and just feeling a connection to the tree, and that nature was not separate from me and just a heart opening, but it was more of an energy explosion where I just was able to feel my heart just it's just like it felt like an ocean. I literally could touch it and it felt like an ocean. It was just like expansive and it was wet. And my forehead was felt like there was a massive eyeball that was blinking very slowly on and off, right? It literally took tissues to try to dry it off because I thought I was like there was like a pool of water on my forehead. Like what's so it, it was profound, but it just reminded me of all of us have this beautiful connection to energy inside of us that's so expansive, but so many of us get so tight and kind of boxed into how we see ourselves that it's hard for us to expand, how our connection and how beautiful and broad we are at our core. And so, at least for me, I value exploration. I think if you look at the planet right now, we would just see it as flat if people weren't daring to explore the bounds and weren't daring to see things differently than how they're currently seeing things. So I think I think life is about constantly expanding the unknown and making friends with the unknown and not being afraid to always expand the relationship with the unknown.
Yeah, yeah. We have each mind, the ego mind, that keeps
Right.
us locked in. And, when we can get ourselves outside of that, and it's really hard to do because it's so
Mm.
easy for us humans to buy in that we are this flesh and bone. But, if we go to the extremes, we're living in this ever expanding universe, right? So we can't get our brains around that. And then even if we get down to the quantum level, we're all just vibrating energy with the illusion that we are form.
Right.
I mean, it's an awesome illusion,
Mm.
but the truth is, down to our tiniest little piece, we're just vibrating energy. So it's mind blowing. What advice would you have dealing with this conscious mind that's trying to lock us in? Because I think you need to set that aside to get to that place, maybe even quiet the mind where
Mm.
you can actually feel like you are one with everything.
Yeah. That was Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, they would say the quieter you become, the more you could hear,
The
right?
quieter you become,
The
the
more you
you
could the
can
more you could actually
hear.
hear. Because most people, they're so loud and they think that they're hearing more, but really they're listening to just the what they call the monkey mind and just kind of useless regurgitation, but I think it's important, for people to understand the gears that they have and to expand that we're more than just the thinking mind, the more than just the body, and to find ways to explore and to connect to some of those other gears and just kind of play with it. But I think really for people it's learning to be in the moment, I think is very important. And by that I mean just kind of the simple things that you do. You could catch yourself, you know, thinking about something 10 minutes from now, 20 minutes from now, or something that happened the other time ago, and just finding ways to just catch yourself being right here, right now, but also with a mind of curiosity, a mind that's looking at the world through open eyes and open ears, not closed eyes and closed ears. And to me, I think that's about the DNA of God for my NDE is awareness. It looks at things in its beautiful form, just as it is, and it doesn't kind of have interference with its own judgment, its own blockages from seeing things at their beautiful core. And so I think it's challenging ourselves to just kind of stretch the bounds of how we may be seeing things or viewing things and have a wider panoramic viewpoint of maybe some things. And so, people could carry over just regurgitated viewpoints of life and they'll constantly see the same things. Or each and every day we could view life as an opportunity to draw on the canvas a different picture of reality and challenge ourselves to see things differently. But I think it really starts with being an artist of the mind and the heart and constantly trying to have a different viewpoint and picture of things.
Yeah, and it takes some practice. It's just like building any muscle. It's boy, that mind, it's tough. I
Yeah,
think of Albert Einstein, who look at how much he did in one lifetime. And
God.
there's stories about him, and one of my most favorite quotes of his is there's two ways to live life.
Mm.
One that nothing is a miracle, and the other is that everything is a miracle. And he
Wow. Yeah.
would give gratitude hundreds of times a day, right? So, you look at somebody who accomplished so much and you think of, was he tapped into kind of a bigger picture using gratitude and also being aware and looking at the miracles of everything around?
It's amazing when you listen to some of these scientists. They're not like Einstein to me was he was like a theologian. He was a thought leader. He was a teacher, spiritual, luminary, and I think to me, being Jewish, the fascinating part is just how he escaped that, you know, in terms of the Holocaust and stuff like that. You just imagine, there's 10 million others and how many other our reality could have been changed. But you look at him and people like, Viktor Frankl and, others of that era who just had such, Eli Wiesel, they just had such an impact, on reality. But yeah, Einstein also had a quote that, I think deals with the universe. And I think it's a very important question is the universe for us, with us, or against us? And that's a very significant piece to really have the foundation of your life? Is life out to get you? Is life a loving place? Is life kind of like an ambivalent place? And I think people come back to near-death experiences because it allows them to maybe have a different viewpoint of reality, because it very easily, this world that we live in could take over the nature of our mind and how we see things. And, especially the last couple of years, it's been difficult for so many. And I think, hearing a near-death experience maybe could allow people to tap into something greater so that their spirit overtakes their world, in a way. How they view things spiritually influences their world, not the opposite. Oh,
Yeah, I think without having a near death experience ourselves, we can gain some wisdom and knowledge and trust. I remember being a kid, they said, put a smile on your face for 30
mm,
seconds and you'll feel happy. It really takes acting as if the world, I think that everything in the world acts for your benefit and
right.
near death experiences are real. And, what would it be like if we really lived life knowing that team of angels and that we got a guide on each side of us or more? Would we take more risks? Would we go after our dreams? I think there's this whole world if we really knew the support we have, that we would go after that we may not be doing right now. And I think that's one of the reasons you keep sharing what you're sharing, right?
Yeah. I think I look at a lot of people and they, the term, I guess, in my field is a midlife crisis where you follow what everyone told you to do. You check off every checklist. You have the big house, the big car, the spouse, the kids, everything. But and then all of a sudden you feel a degree of emptiness. You
Right.
feel just nothing. And so there's people who have everything and feel nothing. And people have nothing technically materially and they feel everything. And I think really it comes back to the fact that we're spiritual beings. We need that connection. That's our foundation. Without that, all things in life just are very minimized and how much we could find joy and beauty. So I think the foundation that we come from could enhance all of our experiences, in this reality. And on my channel that I have, like a big theme is enthusiasm. And I got that really from, one of my great teachers, Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he was on the Shift, he was doing the Shift film, if you're familiar with it. And someone asked him, like, what's like spirituality? What is God? Like, how does someone find that? He goes, enthusiasm. Like they're like, what? Yeah, that's nice, but he says enthusiasm is rooted in the Greek word entheos, which just means the inner God within, the God within us, the God within each one. So when you find things that you love, you are in your enthusiasm, you're connecting to your divine source, and that gets you happy, as you said, that gets you connected. So I think it's important for people to not bypass things of this reality, but to understand that the things that we love here in this reality we we continue to hold on to in the afterlife. We continue. It's like I'm sure you've seen readings where loved ones come through and they're doing things that they love here in this reality. Like my grandpa's always coming through in a fishing pole and stuff like that. Like the things that, so our afterlife, our heaven is this in a way. We carry this reality over there. So it's important to live fully here because that's our heaven when we leave this world.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever told you this story. I'm sure listeners and viewers know it,
Mm,
but before my dad passed, and it was
mm,
a violent death with cancer, it was not
uh,
good.
mm,
But before he did, I had the courage to share with him that I'd been exploring the afterlife and I'd
mm,
taken a few medium courses at the time. And my dad helped tons of cancer and AIDS patients because dad had had cancer 30 years before he
mm.
had passed, and he beat it through visual imagery and all kinds of great things.
Wow.
So he always shared, that you can beat it, you can beat it. And so while I was talking to dad, I said, Dad, I got to tell you about studying the afterlife and whatnot. And in my mind's eye, I saw this yellow airplane, a Piper Cub with black letters. And I thought, uh-oh, like something's happening. And then I just felt this man, jovial, laughing, with me to give my dad the message that you are wrong. You do get to take your toys with you.
Mm,
So it was just so loud in my mind that I said, Dad, I don't know what you're going to think of this, but I said, I just have to tell you. I said, I just
mm,
feel like there's this man here and he's laughing and I see the yellow airplane with the black
mm.
letters and he's saying, you were wrong. You do get to take your toys with you.
Wow.
Well, Jacob, my dad just started to cry, right? His good friend Jim had died just a couple months before. He owned a yellow airplane with the black letters, tail
Mm,
dragger, and my dad helping him kind of fight the battle with cancer. He kept telling him, Jim, you can beat this because you don't get to take your toys with you. So
wow. Wow.
that was a shift with my dad. Like, I want to hear everything that you're up to, Sandra. And he made me promise to write a book. And oh yeah, all good ended up coming because I obviously wouldn't be here with you today without my dad. But just that you're right, our soul's journey continues. Things that we haven't done here on earth, we can do. We can continue to explore. And yes, we bring our toys with us. So that's great news.
What a profound, touching, evidential piece of story. And I think, viewers listening could certainly be inspired by what you said because, I think our loved ones want us to live for them, right? In the lives that we live, A is an undeniable mark of their existence, that they were here and there's an imprint of their DNA in us. but also the things that we do, we're doing, through them, with them, for them. And so by you writing that book, it says Sandra Champlain on it, but it carries your dad too. It carries all those people around you. So it's just kind of like an ode to all those people who had an impact. And it's just this collective uh, wave of love that you're giving to so many people through this soul family that you're a part of. And it's just a collective team effort. It's beautiful. You know.
Thanks. Speaking of books, let's talk about yours and what's in them and why you're so passionate about sharing them.
Well, I love writing. I really do. I'm not if you would have told me, 10, 15 years ago I'd have two books, I thought you're crazy because I started in a community college at the lowest possible writing and reading level in remedial courses. There was two remedial courses and I was at the lowest possible level. And it was hard, but I had an aunt who was very much into spirituality. She read Sylvia Brown and all this stuff. And so she just saw something in me. So she would make me read books each week and give her like a report on it, what I thought about it. So it was many ways from reading all these beautiful books that I, really improved my writing skills, my reading skills. And it also allowed me to kind of go into a library and see the shelf and I'd be like, I want to live with them. I want to be on that shelf one day. And it's just, sometimes when you see someone that you are inspired by, you're like, you could get jealous or you could say, no, that's me. I'm that person that I am inspired by, that I see myself in that person. And so for me, it's just kind of giving back to all these authors that saved my life as a young kid and just influenced my trajectory. It's my way of giving. There's two types of people. You could be givers and takers. And I think it's through giving that you receive. Taking, you receive little usually. uh,
I'm
Full
with you.
things. So, but I just love giving over information to others and just kind of getting out of my own way and surrendering, and just allowing information to come through. But it's the relationships that comes through the book. It's through people's emails and going on tours and stuff like that. That to me is what it's all about. It's about the relationships that you could make through this creative projects. And, there's unlimited possibilities that could happen through those things.
So, Life After Breath was the first one,
It's my
right?
first book. Yeah.
Sharing about your, obviously, your near death experience, probably in a much greater detail than we have in an hour together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a very vulnerable book. And people ask me, why did you get so vulnerable in your memoir? And I said, well, it's kind of like Eli Wiesel's quote that I believe that says, God made us because God loves stories. And why make a boring one? Make something, you know, that's reflective of what you experienced and not kind of sugarcoat it. But I don't want to leave this world known as a near-death experience or afterlife guy. I want people to see themselves as afterlife people, not attached to me. I'm just the guy who had this thing. I want people to remember, hopefully, that they are that, and not to just kind of put us on this ivory tower. I don't have monopolization over that. So I got vulnerable for people to really see that, you know, that I'm human, but they could relate to it, and hopefully, they could find ways to expand their mind and to integrate it. Sometimes you see things so beautiful, you just can't relate to it, you can't integrate it, you know?
I
Um,
do. And what had you write Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder?
well, there was no Jacob's ladder. It's kind of, if you're familiar, like Jacob from the Bible, who I was named after, who was chased by his brother Esau, after the covenant with Isaac and stuff like that. And Jacob had a dream in Beit El in Israel called the House of God. And this dream, when he was running from his life from his brother Esau, he saw the angels going up and down the ladder. And so this to me is an ode to God's sense of humor, where my name is Jacob and I was, in a playground on a ladder on a slide. It's just, kind of the allegory of the whole thing, but also the beauty of the ladder, where a ladder is connected to the ground and goes up to the heavens. So really, the wisdom of Jacob's ladder is about bringing that other stuff down to earth, down to here. And each rung, each lifetime that we're on is another opportunity to become a greater expression of who we truly are, with greater understanding and integration within each lifetime. So it's to bring over the hereafter to the here now so that we don't have to die to have that awareness or have an NDE, like you said, to have that, but rather people could have remembrance of all this stuff. And I have a feeling that people are listening today because there's a part of them that remembers something more. Otherwise, they wouldn't listen. There's something familiar in what we're talking about in some level. That's why they're here and they tune in. So they can continue to expand that and they don't need to go through the torture that I went through with suffocation and trauma and all that stuff, but they could have it without that, just through their hearts and having it really sit right with them. Yeah.
I love talking with you. I really do. And I can
Likewise,
imagine.
yeah.
Thanks, thanks, thanks. But I
Ah,
know when I wrote my book, We Don't Die, I wanted a book where people could
mm,
just open to a random page and
mm,
get some insight for their life. And I have a feeling that Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is a book like that as well, because there is wisdom throughout it
mm,
about life, about not listening to the story of another guy, but it's the story of your own life and
mm.
exploring. Am I right in saying that?
It's very much a teaching
Okay.
book. It's very
Yeah.
much a lessons book. You know, there's a saying that they have, with terms of karma and dharma, where karma is kind of like your story, and dharma is the meaning, the bulk, the purpose, the essence. So life after breath is more the karma, and the wisdom of Jacob's ladder is more the dharma. The meat and the meaning and the lessons and the essence. So that is really about my book is like full teacher mode, kind of thing. Yeah,
Which is good because we're always in a different place. Every time
yeah.
we wake up, it's a new day. And I know, I read some books years ago and I was at one place, and then now I can read them with a whole new set of eyes.
Isn't it amazing? The same things we're looking at. And again, that's a Wayne Dyer thing, but when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, and just how
You've
when
got so many nuggets of wisdom
but
within this
but but
conversation.
I have to start quoting other people. But
All
he's
right.
he's my guy. Yeah, we're both Tauruses, and I have a funny Wayne Dyer story where I never followed Wayne Dyer in his life just as a teacher. It just didn't, come on my radar. But after he passed, I just had a feeling like he was talking to me. He's like, I'm going to be working with you. I'm like, dude, like, who am I for you to like speak to? Like, go to this Rainbow Hay House thing, like, like talk to them. Like, I'm just a dude. Like, why are you coming to small me? And then I found out that he lived here in Long Island. He worked at, like, I believe St. John's, and that's when he just had this other calling to turn down tenure and get into the self-help stuff. And it's just a college professor turned down tenure. So crazy, but he just had this other calling in himself. But later, I had people who were just so close to him who helped me out with my first book. And, that, so essentially, he was behind so many people and they helped me too. And that's what it's all about. And even Anita Morjani, who's, endorsed my first book. I know Wayne was so behind her book because her story really touched a part of him, with maybe what he was experiencing. So, I think it's about the ripple effect. And that's kind of what I understood by Wayne, where so many of he was just kind of orchestrating a lot of his people that, he helped out and they were able to reciprocate it to such a high degree in my life. And I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, do you welcome people to get in touch with you? I know you've got jacoblcooper.com
Yeah.
website. Let us
I,
know what we can find there.
I wanted Jacob Cooper, it just wasn't available. So
No, I get you.
I went with my middle initial, which is Lieb, which means heart. So that's hopefully where I try to come from. I come from the heart. But jacoblcooper.com, and you could find my social media links through Instagram, Facebook. I am on TikTok, and my YouTube channel, which just came out, and we will be having you as an honored guest, soon. So you'll be seeing just great guests and just kind of insights, some teachings, some messages that I have there too. Yes, I titled my book "The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder." It's the other side, but I know that wisdom is just the oxygen of our times, and I say that because I had my own breath taken away and I suffocated, and I just connected to this infinite source of wisdom. And my whole life's purpose is to give back life into others who may not be feeling fully connected to life itself. And I think that is about, because people could try to find God, and they could travel thousands of miles away, go to the Himalayas. I think that's great. or you can understand the DNA of God, and it's really about the giver of life and just really helping out others and being there and giving over beauty and life and uh, just a sense of meaning to others. And that's what I try to do, and I know you do as well too. That's the embodiment, which is more meaningful than finding, you know.
Beautiful. Well, our time is coming to the end. Is there anything else you'd like to share or something I haven't asked you that you feel passionate about? We love to share passions here because as much as we like to know that there's a reality of life after death, what's under that for me is helping people through grief and helping people have a powerful life while they're here. So,
All right.
any other words of wisdom you wish to share?
Well, I'm not going to say words of wisdom. I was about to say "Let It Be" by the Beatles, but this all, yeah. But I think it's important for people to have two truths that could be existing at the same time. That you could have this deep spiritual awareness of the afterlife. You could really be full and deep in it, but you could also be very human too. And you mentioned grief, that we have to allow ourselves to feel our feels and to go through our human stuff and also allow ourselves to feel and understand the spirit stuff too, that they're all important. And because I see a lot of people who just try to bypass all this stuff and they just try to evade it. But I think we're here to learn unconditional love towards ourselves. And that raw pain that we feel and how we relate to it is pivotal. Because from relating to that, that could transcend, transform to how we relate to others. And so I think it's important for people to really, you call inner child stuff, whatever it is, but to not bypass pain, but to listen to pain, because like you and so many others, where would purpose be without pain? Without pain, where would people's purpose be? If you look at anyone who's transformed the world, it has come from many times that deep place of pain. And so through grief, I look at it kind of like near death, no differently, where you looked at death, you saw it straight in his eyes, and you looked right at it, and you were able to have, a different interpretation of the finite, where maybe before you didn't think about it, and now all of a sudden you're thinking about it, and there's maybe less trepidation, but there's more meaning and love and joy that you could have in this lifetime through acknowledging the finite reality of this body while seeing the infinite ray of light behind it. You know.
Yeah, just beautiful. Jacob, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for all you do, Sandra. I couldn't thank you enough for, you really are changing the world, and you just continue to transcend this path, and I'm always inspired by you.
Oh, you're sweet. I just
Uh,
care. That's all. I
so
learn good things. I meet good people, and I just want to share my toys like on the playground.
that's amazing. Yes, and that's the other message I think we have for people is, on my first book, it's endorsed by my friend Alison Dubois, and she had a book called something like "We Are Their Heaven."
Mhm.
So, really sometimes we think of those in the afterlife as just in the afterlife, but the lives that we live, our loved ones view that as their heaven. So entertain them, live life for them, live and explore and enjoy. And that's, to me, the most spiritual thing that you could do is through life itself, and how you're able to broaden the life in front of you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, live life. Your loved ones are with you.
Yeah.
Enjoy. And we get to see, on our Sunday gathering every Sunday. Oh my goodness, it's going on. We're in our fourth year now of doing it
Wow.
every Sunday at 2 o'clock New York time. It's
Wow.
going to go on forever, I'm sure, but each Sunday we have a different theme of
Mm.
inspiration. We've got music videos, we've got an address, normally a reading,
Wow.
a healing section, but there's also a medium demonstration section.
Mm.
And each and every Sunday, people are reunited with their loved ones. And even though just a handful of people come through, it lets everybody know just how close your loved ones are. They're experiencing life with you. They are
Mm.
your biggest cheerleaders. I never forget about, one medium said, I know you've got the picture of your son in your hands and you just gave it a
Mm.
kiss. And the lady's like, I did, so many
Right.
things. They are with us, they love us, and they're not leaving us. And I
No.
think that moment that we transition, we'll get to know just how maybe not easy it is to communicate with our loved ones,
Mm,
but that we are still very much with them, that we communicate through our thoughts and feelings. So I think it's important for everybody to slow down, to have that bigger view, to be
mhm.
aware, because that's also, those little subtle feelings and messages. It's our loved ones saying hello. So, anyways,
Yep.
with that, thank you to Jacob. To our listener or our viewer, a reminder that we don't die.com is our home base. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's a place you can join our mailing list. I don't spam you. Don't worry about that. But it's your name and your email address. And with that, you get a free copy of my book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Chapter 10 is about grief. And much as I love talking about the afterlife, grief is the most painful thing that we human beings have to endure. So, to understand what's in your control, what's out of your control, what's part of our biology, tools to help you move through it, it is to me the most important thing to read. So, that is chapter 10, my gift to you. What else can I tell you? If you enjoy this show, however you're listening to it, share. I know it's uncomfortable sometimes for us to talk to people in our life about our beliefs. And, a lot of us who talk this life after death, we think people will think I'm strange if I share about it. The truth is, oh gosh, I think it's not 100% of the population that believes in the afterlife, but it's well over 75% that do. But we're afraid of what people think of us. So oftentimes we don't share it. But once you do start talking about it, people will say, oh, I had this weird thing happen to me, or I got a sign from my loved one. So if you are inspired, just press the share button. It'll make a difference. Also, go back to visit Jacob's website, jacoblcooper.com. Easy as that. So, in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and it is always my privilege. It gives me so much joy to be your host of We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. So, as Jacob was saying, try to have one of those out of body experiences yourself. Look at your life from a different perspective. Be aware, find the enthusiasm, or act as if you're enthusiastic and your loved ones are with you, and share. You get a whole new world and new experiences to discover. So I really want to thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.